What's up, guys? Toad, back again. College football week 13, the last full week of college football. And it's a week where you get situations that set up in an interesting way because you get teams that are in their conference championship games already. And those are teams that generally you want to tend to look to go against because I've already locked that up. So it's these motivational angles come into play this week quite a bit, and that is going to be what I'm doing. I found four plays that all I think involve situations like that I think are the best of the week. We can get into those in a second, and I'm doing it in the morning, so unlike when I was doing it late night. Last week, I was like, nah, I'm going to sleep, do it in the morning, and I went 7-0 in football, so obviously that's the reason why. Obviously, it's because I'm not doing it late at night, and I'm just doing all this in a haze, and it leads to way worse plays. No, I don't think so. I think I'd wind up on the same plays either way, but last week was good. We were 4-0 in college football, 3-0 on the NFL show. Want to keep it going. I mean, it's unlikely that we're going to go 4-0 again here, but I do like these plays. We've lost a little bit of value on some of these, unfortunately, so we'll see how it turns out, but getting into this a little bit. So I'm not going to do a daily breakdown video today. I'm just going to do this and then do the NFL video real quick and hopefully get it out before the NFL slate begins. And I don't think I'm going to have a play on any of the NFL games for Thanksgiving either. And I don't currently have a play on the college football game that is tonight either. But I'm going to talk about them in this video because there's no NHL, no NBA, and college basketball. I'm just not really interested in the slate today either, so I'm just skipping all that. So I'll talk about tonight's game, which is Mississippi State. So this is a week where you get a lot of these rivalry games as well. This is, I believe, what is this? The Egg Bowl? I forget what this one is called. I think it's the Egg Bowl. Mississippi, big favorite. They've gone down from 11.5 to 10 on the road, though. 75% of the cash, 74% of the tickets. So they are the public road favorite, really, even though it looks like they have a slight cash discrepancy. I don't think I buy that. The number's gone down a bit. It's maybe gone through the key number of 10.5 as well. Sitting at 10, I lean to Mississippi State here, plus the points. So the situation with Mississippi is I'm pretty sure that they cannot make the SEC title game. The SEC title game is already decided that it's Georgia, Alabama in that game. So Mississippi, they really don't have anything to play for here. And I believe, unless I'm wrong, that Mississippi State, I'm looking at last week's schedule here. I believe Mississippi State, they're sitting at 5-6, so they need a win to become bowl eligible. So that's what we're looking at here. So all the motivation is going to be on the Mississippi State side, and they're hosting the game. So maybe I should play this, actually. I'm thinking about it. And Ole Miss, what are they coming off of? Well, they beat UL Monroe and destroyed them, so that's not really a huge game. But yeah, I lean Mississippi State. Ole Miss, they can't advance their position at all at this point, so they're locked in here. You might argue that they want to they could potentially be playing to try to get into a New Year's Six bowl or something like that. Maybe one of the big bowls, whatever. If they remain a 2-loss team, they're kind of in the conversation for one of the better bowls, at least, especially because they're in the SEC. So maybe there's a slight motivational factor because of that and because it's a rivalry. But other than that, probably not. But that's the way I lean there. I lean to Mississippi State plus the points. Let's get into the actual plays here. First play is one of my favorites, but we lost some value on this. The first one that I found on the board, Nebraska -2 is where I'm going. And you got to look at this. First of all, this line just looks totally suspicious. Although, unfortunately, I think Iowa was actually a 1.5 point favorite at some point earlier in the week, and those lines were not up very long. I think they're completely gone. So Nebraska's sitting around. I took a 2. I think really you can only find a 2.5 now. I would not let it get to the 3. I grabbed a 2 a couple days ago. So 2.5, or maybe if you can find a good money line price to just take them to win the game. I like Nebraska here, and the line looks suspicious because, of course, why would you want to play Nebraska here when they're a losing record team? They're playing against ranked Iowa, who only has 2 losses. Like, this looks completely suspicious, right? Why is Nebraska favored here? And this is a game where the total is insanely low, 26.5. So the more points you have to lay, the more risky it kind of gets here because it's such a low total. But I think the spot is just horrific for Iowa State. So that's why I'm on this one. I think it's a very good situation for Nebraska. Although it looks like Nebraska has 56% of the tickets, but 52% of the cash is on Iowa. That might be because the line is getting a little bit too far. And if it gets to 3, like, I don't know if maybe you'll see some buyback on Iowa just because the number is getting too ridiculous. With the number at 2, it's like, it's even saying that Iowa's not that much better a team than Nebraska, although in some cases that's not necessarily untrue. Like, I think the rankings are a little bit misleading. Like, Nebraska, their offense is horrific, but their defense is pretty good. And this actually looks like the total's gotten down to 25.5, which is just insane. This could be a ridiculously low scoring game, one of the lowest scoring games of the week. But why do I like Nebraska? Iowa is in a horrific spot, like I said. They are already locked into the Big Ten championship game. They're locked in. They're going to be playing either Michigan or Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, and I can mention that game in a second because that's like the biggest game of the week, really. So they have nothing left to play for, really. Like, yeah, they're ranked. Like, maybe you could argue they have some. Do they have any motivation to try to advance their bowl standing in any way? Probably not. This is like a huge look ahead because they're already in the conference championship game. They know they're there. And they have to go to Nebraska to play this horrendously ugly Nebraska team just plays some of the ugliest football you can possibly imagine. Nebraska, they have all the motivation here because they're sitting at 5-6, and they probably realize this is a winnable game. They need one win to become bowl eligible. I think that is the goal here. So whereas Iowa has almost nothing to play for because they're already locked into the Big Ten championship game, Nebraska has much to play for because this is bowl eligibility on the line, and this is their final home game, and they've lost 3 in a row, so the stock couldn't really get worse on Nebraska. And before that, I mean, yeah, they didn't beat anybody good, but they were at least sitting with like a decent record before that. Now they've just, gone on this bad losing streak. Losing to Michigan State and Maryland really doesn't look good. Wisconsin's kind of down this year, too. This is the day where they're going to go all out, though, man. This is their final home game. It's senior day. It's at noon. Noon always tends to be kind of a weird spot there. They want bowl eligibility. They got a ranked team, a pretty good team. One of the teams that's in the conference championship already coming to their house. That team really doesn't have much of a motivational reason to play here. So that's what I like. I like Nebraska. The motivational angles should all be on them, which is why the line has moved so much on them. But losing value on it a little bit, but I would say, like, if you can get in still at below the 3 or maybe a good money line price, that's the way I would look at it there. That's how I would do it. That's play number 1. Play number 2, Central Michigan plus 11. So let's look at Central Michigan here. What do we got going on here? Oh, it's right here. Toledo's an 11-point favorite on the road. It looks like 65% of the cash, but also 61% of the tickets on Central Michigan. So it does look like they have the cash discrepancy, but also they have the higher ticket percentage, which seems a little bit weird to me. I don't know if bettors are kind of like coming around to like understanding some of these angles here or what, but this is an angle where I got to fade Toledo here, even though the one thing that keeps me off of it a little bit is that Toledo, they're coming off a scare. So that's the one thing that worries me, like, just very slightly here. But I think the situation is strong enough that I don't care that much about that. And you could argue that they had to put in more of an effort because they were at Bowling Green, and that game could have been an easier win for Toledo potentially. But I think they were not necessarily in the best spot because I think Bowling Green – actually, I don't even remember what the motivational standpoint was there, but I remember I liked Bowling Green quite a bit. I think Toledo at that point was already locked into the MAC title game, and they still are now at this point. So Toledo really does not have that much to play for. They now know who their opponent is in the MAC title game, and that is Miami, Ohio. Miami, Ohio was able to do it and stay ahead of Ohio, so I would also lean, I'll mention it in a minute, but I would also lean against Miami, Ohio here. But Toledo, yeah, I mean, they had to put in a bigger effort to beat Bowling Green, which, like I said, maybe you could argue that would scare them back into focus a little bit. But this is going to be their second straight road game. It is the situation again that they have the MAC title game that they're already looking forward to. I don't know if you could possibly argue, well, maybe they're looking because they're undefeated in conference. They have one loss. Are they trying to get back into the rankings, trying to improve their bowl status? I don't know how much of a motivational factor that's going to be there because I think winning the MAC title game is kind of the goal here at this point. So this Central Michigan game, I don't think it really matters that much to them. Whereas on the other side, the reason I like this so much is on the Central Michigan side, whereas Toledo does not really have much to play for. Central Michigan, they have quite a lot to play for. And yeah, they're coming off kind of a big game against Ohio, but they didn't do well in that game. They lost by 2 touchdowns. So it's not like they almost won the game and now they're coming off, they're in a huge hangover spot, letdown spot. I don't think that's the case here. They're playing for bowl eligibility at this point, just like Nebraska is. They're sitting at 5-6. If they win this game, they can get into a bowl, and I think that is the goal for Central Michigan here. But not only that, this is their senior day. It's a big day for them, man. They want to send the seniors off in style. This is potentially their last game if they're not going to be making a bowl, just like with Nebraska. You might treat this like your bowl game, which also might have the effect of getting you into a bowl as well. You want to win this game. You have a bigger team coming into your house. You have the top team in your conference coming to your house. I think you're going to want to show up. You're going to want to play well, and you're getting a ton of points. Excuse me, at home. Oh, this damn heartburn. I hate it. I used to not have issues like that, and I think it's really only in the morning after I pound a bunch of coffee. It really destroys me. That's all I got to say about that, though. I think Central Michigan, they have pretty much all the motivation on their side there. They're looking for bowl eligibility. This is their final home game. They have a big team coming into their house. I think they're going to want to play. They're going to want to do this, play well, try to win this game. I think that is the case there. Toledo might already have one eye ahead on the MAC title game. That's the way I look at that one. So that's going to be it. Central Michigan plus 11. Next up, another kind of situation similar to that. Kentucky plus 7.5. We're going there. And this is going to be a fade of Louisville. And this one, even though it looks like Louisville has gone up from 7 to 7.5 as a home favorite with 93% of the cash, but 70% of the tickets. So it looks like they have the cash discrepancy on them. It's kind of driving the line up a little bit. I obviously do not agree with it. The public is obviously going to be on Louisville. I mean, they've done almost nothing wrong this year. They're ranked in the top 10, which is ridiculous. They're a one-loss team. They've looked way better than Kentucky. Kentucky's been massively struggling recently. Kentucky's already in a bowl game, too. So why do I like the spot for Kentucky here? Well, I think this is a sandwich, essentially, for Louisville here. And the stock is just as high as it can get on Louisville and probably as low as it can get on Kentucky. Louisville, they just beat Miami, even though it was a close game. That was at Miami. That's a big game, even though Miami's a little bit down. Miami's going to be in a bowl, even though it might be a shitty bowl. Still, they're kind of a name team in the ACC. That's kind of a big game for Louisville there. They got that. Now they have this rivalry game. Is this a neutral site, too? I don't even remember. No, it's in Louisville, so they are hosting it. So it is, but it is also, I mean, yeah, even though it is also their final home game, you just came off Miami and you already have the ACC title game up next against Florida State. And it might add to the look ahead a little bit because Florida State just lost their quarterback, Jordan Travis. He is going to be out. So now Louisville might have even more of an eye on that game, thinking we actually have a better chance to win the ACC now, as crazy as that seems. We're going to be facing a Florida State team that doesn't have their quarterback now, so we might actually be able to win that game. So I think this is a major look-ahead spot for Louisville. And you're coming off a game where you had to play tough against Miami. You got the win, tough road win. Even though you're coming back home and this is a rivalry game, you have to be looking ahead to Florida State. You know what you have on deck, man. And that's a game that now looks all the more winnable because Jordan Travis is going to be out. This is, one of the biggest look-aheads that you could have here. And on the Kentucky side, it's like, what has Kentucky done recently? And Louisville's just on a huge win streak. They've been winning everything. They couldn't possibly look better. Kentucky, they couldn't possibly look worse. Right? They started out hot. They were 5-0, and since then they've won one game and lost five. They're 1-5, but that's when they entered SEC play, man, and they did lose to a bunch of pretty good teams. Even South Carolina isn't really that bad. I think South Carolina's been underperforming. That was the game that I was on last week with South Carolina, but Kentucky actually played better than I expected them to. They actually outplayed South Carolina statistically a bit. I just thought it was a bad spot for them because they had a sandwich in that spot between Alabama, even though they didn't do well against Alabama really either. And they had this Louisville rivalry game up next. And this is going to be, Louisville. So that explains why Kentucky might have dropped the game against South Carolina. You can kind of explain that as being in a bad spot. But even though Kentucky is already bowl eligible, so they do know they're going to be going to some bowl, it's not going to be a big bowl, and I think this game actually means more to Kentucky than whatever bowl they're going to be in. I think this is a huge game for them. They're on like the little brother side of this Kentucky rivalry now, with Louisville being way more dominant than they've been this year. I think they want this game. This is going to be their final game here of the season before you get into the bowls, whereas Louisville, like I said, has another game on deck in the ACC championship game. Kentucky does not have any of that to look ahead to. And like I said, they're going to be in some bowl that's probably not going to matter that much to them. I think Kentucky, if anything, they're going to be a disappointed team going into whatever bowl they're going to be in because they started out so hot and they were ranked. I think they had higher aspirations than falling into some crappy bowl, which is what is going to be the case here. This game is going to be big for them. They're getting a lot of points here. And their team, I mean, they can play defense when it matters. I think they have the ability to keep this game close within the number here. So I like it, and they've been playing such ugly football recently. They're going to want to turn it around. They're going to want to bounce back, and I think it's just adding value on the Kentucky side. And not only that, but Kentucky has faced tougher competition than Louisville has because they're in the SEC. They've faced this really tough SEC slate, which Louisville has not. So Kentucky is used to playing teams that like play more physical, play defense. The ACC is not quite like that. So there are a lot of aspects of this that I like. I think mostly it's the major look ahead for Louisville. So that's what I like there. Kentucky plus 7.5. And we're going to finish it out with a number that's also been moving. Jacksonville State minus 2.5 is going to be the final play here. And this is one of those under the radar types of games here with Jacksonville State. There it is. Jacksonville State against New Mexico State. Jacksonville State looks like they were actually a 2.5 point underdog at one point. And they flipped to the favorite, but now it looks like it's headed towards a 3-point favorite. I would not want to lay the 3 really once it hits that key number, but there are still 2.5s out there. I was able to find one. Hopefully you still can, but they got 96% of the cash, but 79% of the tickets. This is a game that I don't think the recreational bettors are going to really be looking at getting involved in. So I think the professional bettors have gotten involved in this and have really moved the number. I wish I got in this earlier, just like the Nebraska one, but when it's both of those games, even though, the numbers moved a lot, but when it goes through 0, it doesn't matter. The numbers are worth less when it's kind of around 0 there, like between the 3s. It's when it gets to 3 that you start like really losing value there. Inside of the 3s, then it's kind of more just like it's a pick the winner type of situation. But you could also play the Jacksonville State money line if you wanted to here. If you can't find the 2.5, I was able to snag a 2.5 still. It looks like it's primarily 2.5 juiced a little bit at minus 115. I think 2.5, 115 is still better than playing a 3 with reduced juice, though, but I don't know. But what's the situation we have here? I think this situation sets up very nicely for this play. New Mexico State, there are so many factors going against New Mexico State. They're in one of the worst spots of the week. Like, Jacksonville State and Nebraska, I think, are the strongest situational angles on the card here. New Mexico State, they just beat Auburn 31-10. They absolutely crushed Auburn. Huge game for New Mexico State. And this was not even expected, really. They were a 25.5 point underdog. It was at Auburn. They went and Auburn didn't even show up. I mean, look at these stats here. They outgained them almost double, 400-something yards to 200-something yards, more than doubled their first down amounts. It's just crazy. Like, Auburn did not even show up in this game. I think it was also a bad spot for Auburn, probably because they had just beaten the pants off of Arkansas in a nice SEC win there, even though Arkansas is not that good, and they're not going bowling. Still, you blew out Arkansas on the road. It was your second straight road game. You come back home to face a New Mexico State team who was lower competition, not an SEC team. I think they just looked right past them, man. And that win against Arkansas made Auburn bowl eligible. So I think that made them like really unmotivated, made them look right past New Mexico State because Auburn had nothing to play for. Well, we're in a bowl now. We know we're not going to really be able to advance our position any further. And they had Alabama on deck, which is their huge rivalry game, a huge game for Auburn against Alabama. They had no reason to show up against New Mexico State. So that makes the New Mexico State game look maybe better than it was. And it was a blowout win for New Mexico State. So that makes it really bad already. And what else do we have for New Mexico State? Not only is this a major letdown spot, it's a sandwich spot because they're in their conference, Conference USA. Conference USA doesn't have that many teams anymore, man. The conference alignments have changed quite a bit, and they continue to change. But New Mexico State, they are in the conference championship now. That win against Auburn put them in it. So you could have argued maybe they were going to be looking ahead to this game against Jacksonville State because the game against Jacksonville State was what was going to matter as far as which one of them was going to get into the Conference USA championship game. But now that's no longer the case because New Mexico State pulled off a 25.5-point upset against Auburn, and they took that game seriously. They considered it to be a big game going into an SEC team's house. That was a huge game for them. And now they're in the conference championship game against Liberty, so they have a huge look-ahead spot. So this is a gigantic sandwich spot, man. You're coming off one of the biggest upsets in program history, really, probably. Now you get Jacksonville State in a game that now no longer matters for New Mexico State, even though it is their final home game. It's senior night, but does that really matter when you just pulled off such a massive upset? And you have the conference championship game, a huge game against Liberty. That's a big game. Your goal right now is to win the conference. New Mexico State they have very little motivation here, even though it is senior night. I think the lack of motivation trumps this, but also I forgot to mention, because I'm looking at it right now because of this JMU situation. Why? So I'm actually wrong about what I said there. New Mexico State, they already were in the conference championship game even without winning that Auburn game. I think they were already in the conference championship game. I completely forgot about this because why is that the case? Because you're looking at this and you're thinking, well, Jacksonville State could still overtake them. They're tied right now. So this game has to matter for both teams, right? New Mexico State still needs to win this game. No, that's not the case because Jacksonville State is an FBS newcomer like JMU is. They can't make a bowl game. So that's what's going on here. Yeah. So that's the additional motivation for Jacksonville State here, man. I completely forgot about that, but that factors into this handicap quite a bit here. I forgot about it just now. I was remembering it when I made the play, but yeah, Jacksonville State. So this is their final game. They have no other games after this, even though they're 8-3. They would be bowl eligible if they weren't in the whatever you call that. There's a period of time where once you join FBS, you're not bowl eligible for like 2 seasons or whatever. So they can't get into a bowl, so they might treat this like their bowl game just because this is their final game. And this game, if they were eligible to play, which I guess that makes them ineligible to be in the conference championship as well. I think that is the case because otherwise they'd be playing to get into the conference championship game here. So I think that's going to be a big motivational factor on the Jacksonville State side there because they're thinking, if that wasn't the case, like I think the NCAA denied their waiver just like with JMU, even though that seemed like it made JMU a little bit down in their game last week where they actually lost to Appalachian State, which kind of sucked for JMU there. But Jacksonville State, I think this, because this is now their final game, and this is the game that would have mattered, they want to prove that they could have beaten New Mexico State. They're the team that should be in that game against Liberty. So they're playing with a big chip on their shoulder there because they're just in that like hiatus period there, along with JMU and a couple other teams where they're newcomers and they just can't be bowl eligible until I think next year or the year after that. They have something to prove here. It's their final game. They want to prove that they're the team that actually belongs in that conference championship game against Liberty, not New Mexico State. So a lot of weird situations coming into the play here in this game, man. So I like it a lot. I like Jacksonville State. That's going to do it for the 4 plays. How am I doing on time here, by the way? Yeah, I'm not doing too badly. All right, let's keep it going. I'll talk about a few more games here, but the plays are Nebraska -2, Central Michigan +11, Kentucky +7.5, Jacksonville State -2.5. Those are going to be the plays, the 4 official plays of the week, and there are other plays where there are definitely situations coming into play here. So I already talked about the Mississippi State game that's tonight. I said that I lean Mississippi State there because I think all the motivation's on their side there. What else we got going on here? I mentioned the Ball State game, which I will a little bit here. Miami, Ohio, they don't really have anything to play for because they're already in the MAC championship game against Toledo. Ball State can't make a bowl, but this is going to be their final home game. So Miami, Ohio's down from 6.5 to 5 as a road favorite, even though it looks like Ball State has a lot of the public action too. 74% of the tickets, but 75% of the cash. So heavy action, although this is a game the public probably isn't going to be that much involved in. I like Ball State in that one. Final home game for them, senior night, so they have some motivation in that game. You have one of the teams that's in the conference championship coming into your house, so I think you're going to want to play. Miami, Ohio has that Toledo game to look forward to, so it's definitely a look ahead there. So that's the way I look there. I would look to Ball State. I'll talk about the Michigan-Ohio State game just because it's so big. It looks like Michigan's gone down from 4 to 3.5. And Ohio State has 71% of the tickets, but 78% of the cash on them. So it looks like there is some market movement driving Michigan down. And, and it looks like the cash discrepancy is also on Ohio State there. But I'm a little bit hesitant on that because I think the recreational bettors are going to look at this and think these teams are both undefeated. They're ranked like 2 and 3 or whatever. They're going to think this is kind of an even game and think that whenever it's an even game like that, they tend to want to play like the underdog, and you tend to see them playing like the money line underdog play there, taking the money line, the underdog money line price with Ohio State because it's plus money. That's a typical recreational bettor play when they think the teams are kind of like even. They're going to think there's value on Ohio State there because of that. And I think also because of the turmoil at Michigan where Jim Harbaugh is now out. There's that weird like suspension going on there where they had that like, what was it, a cheating scandal or something? It was like Spygate, College Edition, Bill Belichick, College Edition, Jim Harbaugh, which I don't think that comes really as a surprise. I think there are numerous teams that are doing it that just haven't been caught, which I'm against it. I mean, I think it's total BS. I, of course, hated when the Patriots did it. I do consider it to be really shady and underhanded, but I think the recreational bettors are going to also think that that's kind of a negative for Michigan as well. And they're going to look at what these teams did last week, and they'll see Ohio State like blew the doors off of somebody. Who was it? Indiana, maybe? Ohio State had a big, or no, Minnesota. Sorry. Ohio State destroyed Minnesota last week, whereas Michigan barely got by Maryland. I think both teams are in a look ahead, but I think Michigan was in the worst look. I think Michigan was kind of in a sandwich there. I kind of forget, but Michigan, they looked way worse in that game. They barely got by Maryland there, which is a tough place to play on the road. You were laying points at Maryland. Maryland put up a really good fight, really good game against them. So Michigan is the team that looks worse. They have that turmoil going on. They looked worse last week against Maryland, where Ohio State just wrecked Minnesota. So Ohio State looks almost too good here. So that would have me leaning Michigan just slightly there, but I really don't think it's strong at all. So I don't really love it. What else we got? Well, I'll talk about the Rutgers game, I guess, because that's the other side of that Maryland game. Looks like there's some play on Rutgers, moving them from a 1-point dog to a pick 'em. They have 52% of the cash, but 51% of the tickets on the side of Maryland. Both of these teams are already at 6 wins, I believe, so they're both already in a bowl game. But Maryland has looked like the better team recently. They just came off that huge game against Michigan where Michigan came into their house. I think that was senior day for Maryland. It was their final home game. That was a huge game for Maryland. They played all out, and they fell just short of Michigan. So I think Maryland's in a bad spot. This would be a pretty strong lean on the Rutgers side here for me. I couldn't quite get there at the play, but that's the way I lean. Might still be able to get them as an underdog price there. And Rutgers has looked much uglier than Maryland has. Nobody's really going to want Rutgers there. And Rutgers, this is their senior day now, their final home game. So I think that is a little bit of extra motivation on their side there. So that's the way I look at it there. What else we got here? Kansas and K-State, they're coming off a big game. Kansas, they played that game really tough, man, against Kansas State. They can't really advance their position now. They're ranked barely. They're in some bowl game now because they're 7-4. They're bowl eligible. They don't have much to play for. They're coming off really what was their kind of like Super Bowl type of game, and they fell just short of Kansas State. That was a huge game for Kansas, so I would only look to go against Kansas there. Go on Cincinnati there. It's Cincinnati's senior day there. That line, is at 6. It looks like it's gone up a little bit to 6 with juice on Kansas. Kansas has 67% of the cash, but 80% of the tickets, so they got the public on them. I would only look to Cincinnati in that one because I think they're in a bad spot. There are a lot of games I could talk about. I want to keep this kind of short, though. Florida State, Florida is really an interesting game there. Just to clarify there, Kansas, I think, has nothing to play for, and Cincinnati, they're in their final home game. Senior day for them. So I think it's a much bigger game for Cincinnati there. So that's the way I would look there. Taking the points with them. Florida State, Florida. Real weird, interesting game there in a big Florida rivalry there. Florida State's sitting around a 7. It looks like it looks like the line's kind of just sitting there at 7. They have 53% of the cash, but 59% of the tickets. Public looks like they're still on Florida State because they're the undefeated team. They're the much higher ranked team, but Jordan Travis, like I said, is out for Florida State. Now, he got injured. He broke his leg, I think, in their previous game. And it was against some cupcake in Northern Alabama or something. I think it was against not even an FBS team. I don't even know. So Florida State still wound up putting up a ton of points in the second half of that game and winning in a blowout fashion. But now you get kind of the injured player theory coming into play here, which might give you a little bit of value on Florida State because their quarterback is now out. But then on the other hand, it almost looks too easy to take Florida State in a way because everybody knows they're much better than Florida. Florida's coming off a tough game themselves, though. They're coming off a barn burner against Missouri, I think, something like that. So this has a lot of weird aspects to it here. And Florida fell just short of Missouri there as a big underdog. I think they were double-digit underdog, and that was a tough game for them. But Florida is going to want to play tough in this game because it is their big rivalry game, and they're kind of the little brother now in the state of Florida here. They're going to want to play with Jordan Travis out. I think they see it as like a winnable game. Florida State's already locked into the ACC championship game, but I think even with Jordan Travis out, I still think they want to make the playoff, which they still can if they remain undefeated and they win the ACC. I think they'll probably be in the playoff if they do that, which may be a tough ask with their quarterback now out, but so there's a lot of different aspects of this. The injury might give you a little bit of value in Florida State here, but I think there is motivation still on both sides here, even though Florida State does have maybe that look ahead to the ACC championship game. They're still undefeated, so that is also still a motivational factor for them as well. And I think with that injury, it might have them wanting to step up as well. So that's the way I look at that one. I don't know what else to even comment on here. Is there anything else? I said I would kind of like Arizona State here against Arizona, and it looks like the line's going that way with Arizona down from 12 to 10.5 as a road favorite. They got 85% of the tickets, but 80% of the cash. So it looks like the market indicators are all on the Arizona State side. Arizona's dropped from 12 to 12.5 to 10.5, like I said, with the cash discrepancy on Arizona State. So it looks like there is money moving the game in Arizona State. And Arizona State, they're bowl banned, but they're not going to be bowl eligible anyway. So this is their final game. They might treat this like their bowl game. It's at home. So I think it is going to be somewhat of a bigger game for Arizona State because they want to show up. They want to play. They have been competitive in some of these games in the Pac-12 as well. And Arizona's coming off a game that I was on, a big blowout win over who was it over? Utah over a ranked team, so they look really good. Arizona State does not look good, so I think there's probably not going to be value to be had in Arizona at all. Yeah, Arizona State has reason to show up just because they might treat it like their bowl game because it is their final game. Arizona's going to some bowl. They don't know what bowl yet at this point, but the only thing that keeps me off of it is I think Arizona could still get into the Pac-12 championship game. I think Washington is locked in, but I think Arizona is not. So there might still be a little bit of motivation on Arizona's side there. Speaking of Washington, they're playing Washington State, and this is a game that I looked at pretty heavily there. It just seems to me like the market is kind of indicating against it, and there is some money to some extent on Washington, which I think is a little bit weird because I definitely lean to Washington State plus the huge points here, but it's gone down from 17 to 16 with juice, probably around 16 and a half on Washington. I would try to get the 17 if you're actually going to play Washington State here, but I think the situation is not very good for Washington. Washington has 57% of the tickets, but 65% of the cash, though. So even though the number's gone down, it does look like there is some cash on Washington, pushing the number. It looks like there's cash discrepancy on Washington, at least, even though the number has been pushed down a little bit, which is weird. Washington's coming off a huge game. That was like one of the hyped games of the week where they beat Oregon State in a big Pac-12 matchup there to remain undefeated. That was a huge game for them, and now they're in the Pac-12 championship. So are they going to be looking ahead? Do they have one eye ahead on that? Possibly, maybe a little bit, but the only thing in Washington State, they're at 5 wins, so they need a win to become bowl eligible, and it is unlikely, but I think they know that this is their going to be their final game otherwise, so I think they're going to want to pull out all the stops here. They've underperformed this year. Their goal was at least to make a bowl. They were ranked earlier in the year, so they don't want to fall short of that, really, so I think they're going to come to play. They're going to show up. But Washington, the one thing that keeps me off of playing Washington State a little bit is not only just doing the market reading here, but Washington, they want to remain undefeated because they have those playoff aspirations there. So being undefeated still does matter a little bit there. So that's the one thing that kind of keeps me off of that a little bit. And then quickly, maybe I'll mention a couple other games. UNLV, nobody thought that they were going to be in this position, man. UNLV, if they win this, I think they're going to be hosting the Mountain West Championship game, which a few weeks ago looked like that was out of the question, that was not going to be a possibility. They just beat Air Force, so they're in a big letdown spot. That was a huge win over Air Force. I think Air Force now has lost their quarterback, so Air Force is in a tough situation. They were rolling. They were ranked. They were undefeated. They were atop the Mountain West. Then everything just came crashing down. They had games where they committed way too many turnovers, and then it kind of culminated in them losing their quarterback and then losing to UNLV, and that was a huge win for UNLV. They've dropped from a 3-point favorite to a 2.5-point favorite, so the odds makers are actually telling you that UNLV isn't even actually the better team here, which is crazy because people are going to look at their records and think UNLV is certainly the better team. They're laying under a field goal. I think it looks too easy almost to lay the price with UNLV there. And they're in a huge letdown spot coming off that huge win. San Jose State, though, it looks like they have 67% of the tickets on them, but 65% of the cash. So it looks like they're a public underdog of sorts. I don't know if I buy that at all because I don't see why the public would want San Jose State over UNLV. San Jose State's been really flying under the radar. UNLV has the better record. They're the better looking team. People just saw them beat Air Force, which was a huge win. And I think San Jose State, I think they lost to Air Force, probably, because Air Force hasn't lost many games, so I don't even know. But, yeah, I would lean to San Jose State there a little bit just because UNLV is in that letdown spot, but they do still need to win to host the Mountain West title game, which is certainly a possibility now. So that gives them a little bit of motivation there. So that keeps you off of it a little bit. And then you have Alabama, Auburn. Like I said, I lean Auburn a little bit there. Alabama's got 88% of the tickets, but 89% of the cash. I'm not sure if I buy that. They're certainly going to be getting the public action. They're down from 15 to 13.5 as a road favorite. I think it's going to be a big game for Auburn, man. Auburn, I think they're already bowl eligible, but Alabama's already in the conference championship game against Georgia. So, and I don't know if they think they still have playoff hopes, man, because maybe they do. I guess if they beat Georgia and they win the SEC, I guess that would put them in. But I think that's a big look-ahead spot for them to be looking ahead to Georgia there. So I think Auburn, they've been playing so ugly, and they're off. Nothing could get uglier than the loss that I just mentioned, with losing as a 25.5-point favorite to New Mexico State. They just didn't even show up at all. I think they were looking ahead to this one. They're going to want to show up there, so I would have a lean a little bit to Auburn in that one. Maybe that's going to do it, man. I thought there was something else that I was going to say, but I don't know. Is there anything else I should comment on here? That might be it. I know Troy is also already locked into their conference championship game, so maybe I'll mention that, even though. So it looks like they've gone down from a 16.5-point favorite to 16, but it looks like they have 56% of the cash on them, even though 57% of the tickets are on Southern Miss. I'm not sure I buy that, really. Troy is already locked into their conference title game, so they might be looking ahead. This is Southern Miss, their final home game, and they're not going bowling, I'm pretty sure, so they might treat this like their bowl game. They have one of the conference leaders coming into their house. I think they might show up and want to play a good game against them on senior night, so Troy might have one eye looking ahead to the whatever it is, the Sun Belt. I think is it this? No, I don't even know what the hell. Maybe it's the. I don't even know what conferences is at this point, but Troy is in it. I think it is the Sun Belt. They might be looking ahead to that game. Southern Miss, though, they're off kind of a big game against Mississippi State, so it was the game where they stepped up in class, but Mississippi State did beat them by multiple scores. But that's the one, that and the market discrepancy kind of gives me a little bit of hesitation on that one. Slightly, a little bit, just slightly. And then let's look ahead to what else we got here. Any other games? Yeah, Liberty is also locked into a bowl. I think that's the only other team that I haven't mentioned that's in a bowl game. So, well, let's look at them. What do they got? They're right there. Liberty, maybe a similar situation. They're at UTEP, who they're also not going bowling. They're one of the lower teams in that conference as well. Or, sorry, this is a different I don't even know what conference is what at this point, to be honest, man. I don't know which is which. Troy, it is Troy against Liberty, right? No, it's New Mexico State against Liberty in the Conference USA. What am I even thinking? Yeah. And Troy doesn't know who their opponent's going to be yet. I get all these conferences mixed up, man, at this point. These teams keep shifting around. But, yeah, Liberty's already locked into their conference championship game against New Mexico State. They've gone up from 16.5 to 17 as a road favorite. They got 91% of the tickets, but 90% of the cash. So they're certainly a public road favorite there. One thing that keeps me off of it a little bit is that Liberty is ranked. Like, it's possible that they want to maintain their status and try to get into as big a bowl game as possible, but it is a big look ahead there for them because they're locked into their conference championship game, so they might be looking ahead to that a little bit, and they kind of just want to get in and get out. When you know you're in your conference championship already, one of those other factors there for all these teams that I mentioned is that, especially when you're playing a team that you know you can probably beat easily, you don't want to get anybody injured, and you don't want to show whatever tricks you might have up your sleeve. So you don't really tend to go all out in that game. You don't want to force the issue, get people hurt, and you don't want to show everything, all these new wrinkles that you might show in that much bigger game that you have up next week. So that's the thing. So when they're laying a big price like that, that factors into the handicap as well. So they might not really be going all out to try to cover that. It's a situation where you want to win, but you also might be playing to just win the game and not lose it and just get in and get out. So, and of course, like I said, they have a lot of the public action on them. So it looks like the money discrepancy is on the UTEP side there, and it is UTEP's final home game, senior day. So they're probably going to want to send their team off with a bang there as well. That might be it, man. And Oregon State, well, that's a big game too. So could talk about that a little bit, I guess. Quickly, Oregon's a 14-point favorite at home. It's a big game, though. I think Oregon State's coming off a game, man. I don't know if they're going to be in a bit of a hangover spot because they played Washington so close, and that was a huge game for them, playing Washington there. And they fell just short, so they might not be in the best spot after that. It looks like Oregon has 79% of the cash, but only 69% of the tickets. So it looks like there is some cash discrepancy on Oregon, who I think is coming off a much easier game that they played last week, where Oregon State's coming off that really difficult game. But still, Oregon State obviously is going to have to be motivated here. This is a big rivalry game. It's the Civil War, and they're still playing little brother there. Oregon is high up in the Pac-12 there, and I don't know if it's the case if both of these teams still could potentially get into the Pac-12 championship game. I'm not sure. Excuse me. On the Oregon side, they are definitely still playing to get in it, but I don't know if Oregon State with their loss is now out of it. I would have to look. I'm not even sure about that, but it's still a big rivalry game on both sides, but I think Oregon State's in the tougher spot there because they played such a tough game against Washington last week. It's like, are they going to run out of steam by the end of this game? I don't know. And Oregon does still need to win this game, I believe, to get into the Pac-12 title game. So that's another big game there. So that one's a little bit tough to read as well. And we'll finish it up. 45 minutes. Go over the actual plays one more time. Nebraska -2, Central Michigan +11, Kentucky +7.5, and Jacksonville State -2.5. I'm Toad. I'm Tower Gang Toad of the Tower Gang Podcast. We had a real banger of an episode last night where we just didn't want to end it. Went over 2 hours. We had Raven, who was one of Top Lob, so one of the other Tower Gang co-hosts. It's one of his co-hosts on his other show, Nephilim Death Squad, where they talk conspiracy stuff. He came and he hung out. We had a lot of fun on that one. It was a really raucous episode there. Should be up on all the platforms pretty shortly as well. We are the most offensive, hilarious podcast on the planet, so check out the Tower Gang Podcast, man. TowerGangPod.com, I believe, is where we are for all the links. You can support us on the locals, TowerGang.locals.com. And I'm going to give one shout out because I forgot last week, and I have been doing it on some of my shows here. Shout out to Flapper, who are my unofficial sponsor at this point, FLAPPR.net, flapper.net. They, like me, are political shit posters. Well, you can follow me at Tower Gang Toad on Twitter as well. Flapper, like me, like I said, they do humor, politics, titties, and they have a blog where they talk about all that stuff, and they talk about sports as well. So give those guys a follow. They're some of my friends. They're good guys over there. That's going to do it, man. Follow Flapper, follow the Tower Gang Pod, follow me at Tower Gang Toad, at Tower Gang Toad on Twitter. I'm going to be right back with the NFL show and get that done with not that much time left before the Thanksgiving games, although I don't have that much to say about that particular slate of games. My actual plays in the NFL are going to be in the Sunday games, I believe. So I will have that video up shortly, and I believe it'll be shorter than this one will be, but have a good one, man. Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your food coma. Eat all the food, man. Eat all the turkey. Let's do it. I'm starting to slip into a coma just thinking about it. Peace.